Hi there. Today I look at two examples of very common kind of things you find when you're looking in secondhand music, not secondhand music shops, secondhand shops. And that is greatest hits collections. Because when you think about it, who who is donating their items, in this case their old CDs, to these charity shops? And usually, not always, but I'd say in the most general sense, it would be people who are not necessarily big music fans. And when I say music fan, like, everyone likes music. It's not often you come across someone who just doesn't like music. Although I did meet a guy once from Saudi Arabia, and he told me he didn't like music. He didn't like listening to music. And then upon further questioning, it turned out he didn't like it because it brought up feelings that he didn't want to feel. Maybe something to do with his religion. Maybe, he said, like, feelings about, women he used to like, or things like that. But anyway, um, what was I saying? That's right. Most people like music. Okay, most humans, we've got a kind of hardwired in our brain to enjoy music. Um, and so people through the ages have done different things. Some people just listen to the radio, and for them that's enough, or watch music shows on TV, that's enough. Some people go further and they actually buy the CD or the tape or the record, the physical media, and maybe just one or two is enough of the things that they like the most, or a kind of compilation of all the most recent hits on the radio. And I guess nowadays with the internet and streaming, it's kind of taken a step above that, where anything is available at any time, anywhere. But if we take a step back to when I was talking about people buying CDs, most people didn't have massive CD collections, even in the heyday of CDs. I think about people like my parents. Okay, my parents are pretty typical. They're baby boomer generation, born in the mid to late 40s, 1940s, and they, like, the things they grew up with, especially things from kind of the 60s. And then as time progressed, they found other stuff. My dad in particular, you liked Irish music, like Irish folk music, like the Chieftains and the Dubliners and things like that, the Furies. Um, but they probably owned, in their entire life, maybe 20 or 30 CDs, and they were things like greatest hits collections. I think they had like a few, like, compilations of things sometimes I'd seen on TV and I wanted to find a CD. But a big thing was greatest hits collections, because it's an easy way to get all the most famous songs of an artist that you might like. And so that's why it's so common that the average person probably tended to buy those, unless it was like a super huge album, like, I don't know, what's something like Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. That's kind of an album like that, kind of had so many singles on it that it was able to kind of cross into Joe Blow buying it. Um, Kind of lost what I'm trying to say now, but what I'm saying is that, therefore, we go ahead a few decades further, and people are getting rid of their music collections, and the people who are most likely to get rid of their music collections are people who didn't really care that much in the first place, like my parents. My parents used to have a stereo system when I was a kid, and they would have the CDs out, like, I think they had them in a kind of like a rack, or like a special shelf next to the CD player, the stereo system. Nowadays, there's no stereo system, and there's certainly no CDs on display. I think the CDs are in a box downstairs. And I could very much imagine one day going around there and my mum saying, "Oh, I took the box of CDs down to the second-hand shop today to give them away." That my parents are the kind of people who would do that to make room in the house. And if they did do it, the kind of things they would have would be greatest hits collections and compilations and other bits and pieces. So someone who's a more uh, I don't know, ardent music fan, someone like my older brother, my oldest brother. He's quite a bit older than me. He's about 13 years older than me. So he kind of grew up in the 70s and the 80s, but he liked all the 60s music as well. I don't actually know if he does. I haven't really talked to him about this, interestingly enough, but I could imagine he would have kept all his CDs and even his vinyl from when he was young. I would imagine he's kept all of that. I'd be quite surprised if he got rid of it. And he would have a pretty good range of stuff, of classic rock stuff. He wouldn't have a lot of greatest hits collections. He would have a lot more albums of like The Who and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is that when you go to these charity secondhand shops, you do tend to find a lot of greatest hits collections because that's what people are getting rid of, and the kind of people who get rid of their music collection are the kind of people who would have greatest hits collections. Yeah, I think I've kind of tied all that together now, my point. And so you find a lot of them. And I've bought a lot of them secondhand as well, a lot. And, I'm not going to lie, probably more often than not would prefer to have the albums that make up the greatest hits, from Bon Jovi, or the albums were a bit Slippery When Wet and New Jersey, and those are the two that I know. From Bruce Springsteen, there were so many Born to Run and Born in the USA, and I don't know, his more recent ones, Nebraska, so on and so forth. But you don't really find those in the secondhand charity shops. If you're into a secondhand music shop, you might find them. Probably not even there nowadays either, to be honest. But you're not finding these very often. You do come across albums, of course you do, but much less common than greatest hits collections. In saying that, greatest hits collections are good for the bands that you don't really like. And I guess the reason I chose these two, I was just going to say New Jersey, they both start with B, and they're both from New Jersey, and they're both artists who I'm not the biggest fan of. There's certainly songs of theirs that I really enjoy, but they would be a handful of songs. And so in some ways, probably it's better that I do have the greatest hits collections, because if I had the albums, I probably wouldn't listen the whole way through to them very often, and they'll just be taking up space. So I guess that kind of proves the point of the value of greatest hits collections. So just looking at it, we've got Bon Jovi Crossroads, the best of. And then you've got the band. There's John Bon Jovi. Is that David Bryan, the keyboardist? Which one's Richie Sambora? Is that Richie Sambora? That's Tico Torres, the drummer. I can recognize him. He's like 5'1". I didn't actually know Richie Sambora is not even in the band at the moment. Like I've seen, I read Blabbermouth. If you're a fan of metal music or hard rock music, you might know Blabbermouth. It's kind of like what do they call it? Like a news aggregate site where they kind of get together all the latest music headlines, or at least for hard rock and heavy metal, and post them, and people comment on them. And from time to time, I'll see like headlines saying Richie Sambora this, Richie Sambora that, but I never actually read them because I don't really care enough about Bon Jovi to read an article. But apparently he's a solo, and he has been for quite some time. Quite surprised, because I think of him and Bon Jovi and John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora is kind of like almost like Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, or Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, kind of like a vocalist and lead guitarist pairing. I don't know actually how much Richie Sambora actually wrote in the band, but anyway. This is obviously their greatest hits from when their heyday, the late 80s, early 90s. Living on a Prayer, Keep the Faith, Wanted, Dead or Alive, Lay Your Hands, You Give Love a Bad Name, Blaze of Glory, Bad Medicine. They got a lot of hits, don't they? And then the more recent ones, which is more recent, it's hardly more recent. I think it was still in the 90s. Always, which is kind of like a ballad. This must be, what year did this come out? Because they had another one. They had that song, It's My Life, and that would have been about 99, 2000, 2001-ish, and that's not on here. So I'd say this must be probably mid-90s, mid to late 90s, but before that era of the band. So, I guess there's value in this for me is that I like a few Bon Jovi songs. To be honest, Living on a Prayer and You Give Love a Bad Name, I've probably heard those 10 times more than I'd ever want to in my life. As in, I've heard them 10,000 times. I'm past the point of wanting ever to hear them again. I like that song, Keep the Faith. I also like that song, Lay Your Hands on Me. So they're both on here. Bad Medicine, I like a little bit more than those other ones, maybe because it wasn't so overplayed. But got a crack case here. This would have been 50 cents when I bought this. The teeth are still intact and holding the CD in place, so that's good. Oh, there's the band there. So then, I can't recognize them. So I know John Bon Jovi and David Bryan. Which one's Richie Sambora? None of them look like Richie Sambora. Maybe I've got a picture of Richie Sambora in my mind that's different from what he looked like. I'm confused now. And one of the guys died recently, didn't? Was that Alec John Such? I remember listening to a video with Eddie Trunk talking about it. Maybe this will elucidate. That's Richie Sambora, isn't it? I can kind of recognize his face there. Then which one's on? I assume that's Richie Sambora. He looks a bit different in every picture. Is that him there? It's weird. In my mind, I had him looking completely different than this. Maybe it's just these pictures. He looks different. And that is Tico Torres. Am I wrong about that as well? And who's that guy? Can we find any names here? There's some of their old albums. Keep the Faith, Slippery When Wet, New Jersey, the Young Guns soundtrack. No, it doesn't give us any insight into their names. Thanks a lot, guys. So yeah, I remember when I was younger, I had a friend who really loved Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi toured here, and when they toured, they brought Dogstar. You might remember Dogstar. That was Keanu Reeves' band. Remember, Keanu Reeves was the bassist in a kind of alternative rock band in the 90s. I can't say I've ever heard a song by them, but they toured with Bon Jovi and they played a concert here at, I think it was Mount Smart Stadium or somewhere like that. But anyway, very similar feeling I have for this next one, Bruce Springsteen. Now, I know a lot of people absolutely love Bruce Springsteen. And I've got to say, I'm a little bit baffled by the love. Because he's always come across to me as quite, I don't know, boring, I guess. And that's just me, obviously. But I mean as in, I like lots of music that people don't like, and sometimes I don't understand how they can't like what I like, but obviously we all have our different opinions. But yeah, just I guess the way that I'm confused is because people are so into him. Like there's like super fans out there who think he's like the greatest musician in everything he's done. And there's that song Thunder Road. It's probably on this somewhere. And I've heard 2 or 3 people tell me it's the greatest song ever written. And I've listened to it every time. I've listened to it a couple of times. I just thought, this is just boring nothing. I can't understand how it sounds like a throwaway album track. But anyway, he's also got a lot of hits. This is quite a famous greatest hits. You see this around a lot. And I remember when I was a teenager, one of my girlfriends had it on cassette tape. and she loved him. I remember. I have this memory once we're out at night and we're in the car with another guy, like one of my friends. He was driving. You know, you're like the sober driver, and he had the CD in his set. It was like weird, kind of, that we were relatively young, and these guys were like listening to like Bruce Springsteen. Kind of, anyway, um, this is also in good condition. All the teeth intact. Pretty good condition. A few little smears along the edge, but nothing major. It's a picture of Bruce holding his Telecaster. Young Bruce. So I assume these are the lyrics? No. He just talks a little about them. Born to Run. My shot at the title. A 24-year-old kid aiming at the greatest rock and roll record ever. Thunder Road. Stole the title from Robert Mitchum. Picture. The vocal sound from Roy Orbison. The innocence at the time was mine. Okay. Like, he obviously sings a lot about, like, yeah, like I've talked about this before, how there's certain American acts that are so culturally American that they don't always cross over. Well, this is not true though, because fucking millions of New Zealanders and many other countries love this guy, so it's not. But I do feel that sometimes that, you know, I did a video a couple of months ago about John Cougar Mellencamp, and I like John Cougar Mellencamp. I probably like him more than I like Bruce Springsteen. But I find his work is also very culturally American, that to the extent that sometimes almost you can't relate to it, like not just lyrically, like the topics they're talking about, you know, like in like Born to Run, they're talking about American dreams and cars, and these aren't necessarily things that are part of the life that I know or that anyone else who grew up in my country knows. But is that important? Do you need those things to really appreciate a song? I don't think so. So yeah, there's Thunder Road there. Badlands, The River, Hungry Heart. Got a very 80s sound on that. Atlantic City, Dancing in the Dark. I don't like Dancing in the Dark. Born in the USA. I like, so the songs that I do like, I like Born to Run. I like Born in the USA. So, you know, maybe I'm overstating how that I don't like him, because I do. I think he does what he does very well, and maybe I should say, I was just saying I can't understand why people like him, but maybe I can understand, but at the same time, I don't share that love. My Hometown, don't like that song. I don't know. Too drony. Glory Days is a good song. Brilliant Disguise. Human Touch, that's okay. Better Days. Streets of Philadelphia. I actually think it's quite a nice song. Secret Garden. Too many bad memories connect to that and to Jerry Maguire. Maybe that's why I don't like it. Murder Incorporated. Blood Brothers, This Hard Land. So there's a lot of songs in there that I would just skip over. And again, I've read a lot. You know, I read all the kind of what would you call them? The British music magazines, things like Uncut. If you're familiar with Uncut, it's kind of a monthly music magazine that really focuses on the golden age of rock. You know, late 60s, 70s, 80s. So, you know, the cover stars are usually people like the ones I remember just in the last year: David Bowie, Joni Mitchell, Paul McCartney, Paul Weller. Anyway, one of them was Bruce Springsteen. And so he's kind of like, he's in that pantheon of top tier rock gods. You don't even want to say rock god, rock, you know. He's one of those guys that will go down as one of the biggest and, dare I say, greatest rock and roll musicians ever. I don't necessarily share and the love for him, like I said, but I wouldn't ever deny it and say, "Oh, he doesn't deserve to be there." Because it's so like so many people are so love him so much that there must be something there, even if I don't necessarily always get it. But yeah, two good examples of pretty common things that you find in secondhand shops here. Greatest hits collections of artists from 20 to 30 years ago or longer. Um, do they even still make greatest hits collections for more recent artists? I don't know. Does like, I don't know. Does, do, does like Jay-Z have a greatest hits collection? Do BTS have a greatest hits collection? I guess they haven't been around long enough, have they? I'm sure they will one day. Will they though? Yeah. Because everything is on stream now, that the physical CDs are not such a common thing that you can make your own playlist of greatest hits now, and your opinion of the greatest hits. Because that's another thing with the greatest hits is that if you like the band a little bit more than just casually, usually you'll have a different opinion about things that are included on the greatest hits collection. I just paused there to look for another greatest hits collection I disagreed with, but actually most of them are kind of older artists that I'm not that familiar with beyond, like, for example, Supertramp. I wouldn't say I know any other songs beyond the greatest hits for a band like Supertramp. Goodbye, logical, bloody all right, Brits America, I'll take the long, yeah, anyway. Okay, so yeah, I guess I've proven my point, kind of. Maybe I'm just as much a target as greatest hits. I was trying to like make it out as though I'm some musical appreciator beyond that, but actually no. We can all get something out of greatest hits, I think. Yeah. All right. It's been a bit of a ramble, I know, but hopefully you watched it. Someone to the end. Does anyone ever watch right to the end of these things? Thank you very much for watching.